Ever wondered why your grandfather's old truck just kept running and running and running while your brand new ride is already throwing engine codes at 40,000 miles? Well, there's a reason for that. There was a time when engineers didn't build engines to be replaced. They built them to be passed down. We're talking about power plants so overbuilt, so ridiculously tough, that some of them are still hauling loads today with 1,000,000 miles on the clock and no signs of quitting. Today we're counting down 20 vintage truck engines that were genuinely built to last forever. If you're enjoying this kind of content, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. Number 20. The Chevrolet 4.3-liter Vortec V6. The 4.3 might not be the first engine that comes to mind when you think of legendary truck motors, but that's exactly why it deserves a spot here. It's the quiet achiever. Chevrolet introduced it in 1985, and here's the thing. It's basically a small block 350 with 2 cylinders lopped off. That's not an insult, that's a compliment. It inherited all the durability and simplicity of the most popular V8 ever made, just in a smaller package. The 4.3 powered S10s, Blazers, full-size vans, and half-ton pickups. It made 150 to 200 horsepower depending on the year, which wasn't winning drag races, but got the job done day after day. What made it special was iron block construction, push rod simplicity, and parts that were everywhere, and dirt cheap. Mechanics loved it because nothing complicated could go wrong. Owners loved it because it wouldn't die. Plenty sailed past 300,000 miles with basic oil changes and maybe a water pump. Not flashy, not exciting, but absolutely reliable. Number 19, the Chrysler Slant 6 225. If there was ever an engine that earned the nickname bulletproof, it's the Chrysler Slant 6. Produced for an incredible 41 years, from 1959 to 2000, this inline 6 was tilted 30 degrees to the right in the engine bay, hence the slant name. That quirky angle actually lowered the hood line and improved maintenance accessibility. The 225 cubic inch version became legendary. It powered Dodge trucks, Plymouth Valiants, and just about everything Chrysler made for decades. The cast iron block and head were practically indestructible, and the design was so simple that a shade tree mechanic with basic tools could rebuild one in a weekend. These engines survived hundreds of thousands of miles on nothing more than regular oil changes. Taxi companies and fleet operators loved them because they just kept going. There are documented cases of Slant 6s running past 400,000 miles without a major overhaul. For an engine designed in the late 1950s, that's extraordinary. It wasn't powerful. Maybe 145 horsepower on a good day, but power wasn't the point. Survival was. And the Slant 6 survived everything. Number 18. The Dodge 440 Big Block. In the late 1960s and 70s, if you wanted serious muscle in your Dodge truck, the 440 cubic inch Big Block was the answer. This was Chrysler's largest production V8, and it found its way into everything from luxury sedans to heavy-duty work trucks. In truck trim, the 440 was rated at around 225 horsepower, which sounds modest today, but the torque was what mattered. Over 300 foot-pounds of low-end grunt that could pull stumps out of the ground. The 440 used a wedge combustion chamber design, simpler and cheaper than the Hemi, but no less durable. The deep-skirted cast-iron block was incredibly strong, and the forged crankshaft could handle abuse that would snap lesser engines. Dodge put the 440 in their D-Series trucks and the Warlock pickup in 1978. What made it special for truck duty was massive torque at low RPM. You didn't need to rev it, just mash the throttle and hold on. The aftermarket embraced the 440 too, so performance parts were always available. It was big, it was thirsty, and it was virtually indestructible. Number 17. The Ford 390 FE V8. Ford's FE engine family is the stuff of legends, and the 390 cubic inch version might be the toughest of the bunch. Designed in 1961, the 390 landed in Ford trucks in 1967 and became a staple for nearly a decade. This 6.4-liter V8 cranked out 335 horsepower and over 400 foot-pounds of torque in its prime configurations. In trucks, it was detuned for longevity, sitting closer to 270 horsepower, but the torque was still earth-moving. The FE block was cast iron and massively overbuilt, with thick cylinder walls and heavy main bearing caps designed for duty in everything from police interceptors to dump trucks. The 390 powered F-Series pickups, medium-duty trucks, and Mercury sedans. What truck owners appreciated most was its low RPM pulling power and ability to take punishment without complaint. These engines ran for decades in farm trucks, hauling hay and pulling trailers without ever seeing a machine shop. The 390 was phased out in the mid-1970s, but its reputation for toughness lives on. Number 16. The Toyota 22R and 22RE. Here's an engine that built Toyota's reputation for reliability almost single-handedly. The 22R debuted in 1981 as a 2.4-liter inline four, and the fuel-injected 22RE followed in 1984. Together they powered Toyota pickups and 4Runners for over a decade. A four-cylinder in a truck might not sound impressive, but this engine was absurdly over-engineered. The cast-iron block was thick enough to stop a bullet, the timing chain was built like something from a marine engine, and the bottom end was so robust that tuners bolted turbochargers onto stock internals without worry. Toyota rated the 22RE at around 114 horsepower, laughable by modern standards. But these trucks weren't about speed. They were about going anywhere and never breaking down. There are 22RE Toyotas still running with over 500,000 miles on original engines. In developing countries, these trucks remain daily workhorses decades after rolling off the line. The engine's simplicity was its greatest strength. No variable valve timing, no turbochargers, no complicated electronics, just a well-built engine doing its job every single day without drama. Number 15. The Ford 351 Windsor. The Ford 351 Windsor gets overlooked in favor of flashier cousins, but in the truck world, it was a quiet hero. Introduced in 1969, this 5.8-liter V8 powered F-Series trucks from the early 80s through 1996. The Windsor typically produced around 210 horsepower in truck trim. What it lacked in outright power, it made up for in pure, stubborn reliability. The iron block and iron heads were virtually immune to cracking, and the bottom end handled towing loads that stressed lesser engines. Truck owners loved it because it combined decent power with good fuel economy for a V8 of its era. It could tow a boat, haul lumber, and still return reasonable highway mileage. Parts were never an issue since Ford produced millions across multiple platforms. The 351 Windsor quietly did its job for nearly 3 decades. It wasn't the engine on magazine covers, but it was the one that got you home every single time. Number 14. The Chevrolet 454 Big Block. When GM needed raw power for heavy-duty trucks, they turned to the 454 cubic inch Big Block. Introduced in 1970, this 7.4-liter V8 delivered massive torque right off idle. In truck applications, it produced around 230 to 250 horsepower, but torque was the real number, up to 385 foot-pounds in some configurations. That meant pulling loaded trailers up mountain grades without breaking a sweat. GM put the 454 in C/K series trucks, Suburbans, and 1-ton chassis. It was the go-to engine for serious towing and hauling. The construction was classic big block, cast iron everything, with a forged crankshaft and connecting rods that could handle enormous stress. The 454's real trick was low RPM torque delivery. You barely touched the throttle before it pulled like a locomotive. Sure, it drank fuel like a sailor on shore leave, but that was the trade-off for what felt like unlimited pulling power. The big block remained in production in various forms until the mid-2000s, a testament to just how good the original design was. Number 13. The Mack E7. Now we're entering serious heavy-duty territory. The Mack E7 is the engine that built the Mack Bulldog's reputation as the ultimate workhorse. First introduced in 1988, this inline six-cylinder diesel was designed for one thing: durability under the most punishing conditions imaginable. Mack engines have always been different from the competition. While Cummins, Caterpillar, and Detroit Diesel chased horsepower numbers, Mack focused on torque-to-the-ground efficiency. The E7 produced between 250 and 454 horsepower, but it was the way it delivered power through Mack's proprietary transmissions and differentials that set it apart. The engine's optimal running range was between 1,400 and 1,800 revolutions per minute, and at those speeds it was virtually unstoppable. Dump trucks, refuse vehicles, fire engines, and transit buses all relied on the E7. It wasn't uncommon to see these engines accumulate 1.5 million miles hauling full loads without needing a major overhaul. That's not a typo. 1.5 million miles. Mack accomplished this through robust construction, the patented Econovance variable injection timing system introduced after 1990, and a design philosophy that prioritized longevity over everything else. The E7 remained in production for over 20 years and spawned the E-Tech series that continued the tradition. In the world of heavy-duty trucking, the Mack E7 is still spoken about with reverence. Number 12. The GM Duramax LBZ 6.6 liter. The Duramax LBZ might be the newest engine on this list, but it earned its spot by being arguably the most bulletproof diesel ever put in a pickup truck. Produced for just 2 model years, 2006 and 2007, the LBZ was a 6.6-liter turbocharged V8 that GM installed in the Silverado HD and Sierra HD. It produced 360 horsepower and 650 foot-pounds of torque right from the factory. But here's what made the LBZ special. It arrived just before the most aggressive diesel emissions regulations kicked in. That means it had an EGR system and a diesel oxidation catalyst, but no diesel particulate filter. This sweet spot in emissions technology meant the engine ran cleaner than its predecessors without the reliability headaches that plagued later models. The cast iron block paired with aluminum heads gave it a perfect balance of strength and weight savings. When paired with the Allison 1000 6-speed automatic transmission, the LBZ was a towing machine that could pull anything you hooked up to it. Owners who kept these engines close to stock and maintained them properly reported reaching 300,000, 400,000, even 500,000 miles without major issues. In the modern diesel world, the LBZ is the gold standard. Number 11. The Chevrolet Small Block 350. It's almost impossible to talk about truck engines without the Chevy 350. This is arguably the most important V8 ever produced. Chevrolet introduced the 350 cubic inch small block in 1967, and it powered virtually every vehicle in the GM lineup for decades. In trucks, it was the default choice for C/K pickups, Blazers, and Suburbans from the early 70s through the late 90s. It produced anywhere from 165 to over 250 horsepower depending on configuration. But horsepower numbers don't tell the real story. The 350's genius was in its design. A compact iron block, lightweight for a V8, with a 4-inch bore and 3.48-inch stroke that made it happy at any RPM. It was simple enough for a teenager to rebuild in a garage, and parts were at every auto store in the country. In 2008, a Wisconsin man reported his 1991 Chevy pickup had logged over 1 million miles on its original 350 without major repairs. 1 million miles on a gasoline V8. That about says it all. The Chevy 350 wasn't just an engine. It was the backbone of American trucking. Number 10. The Ford 7.3-liter Power Stroke. If you ask any diesel truck enthusiast to name the most reliable diesel pickup engine ever made, the Ford 7.3-liter Power Stroke will come up in just about every conversation. Produced by International Navistar and installed in Ford Super Duty trucks from 1994 through 2003, this turbocharged V8 displaced 444 cubic inches and produced up to 275 horsepower and 525 foot-pounds of torque in its final years. Those numbers were impressive for the era, but the real story was the engine's sheer refusal to die. The 7.3 used a direct injection system that was remarkably simple compared to later common rail designs. Its cast iron block was massively overbuilt, and the rotating assembly was forged to withstand enormous cylinder pressures. Ford sold over 2 million Super Duty trucks equipped with the 7.3, and many of those are still on the road today, racking up miles that would have scrapped lesser engines long ago. The engine was eventually replaced in 2003 to meet stricter emission standards, and the trucks that still carry the 7.3 command premium prices on the used market. Owners treat them like gold because they know what they have, an engine that simply doesn't quit. Number 9. The Detroit Diesel 6-71. Here's an engine with a story spanning nearly 6 decades of continuous production. The Detroit Diesel 6-71, affectionately known as the Screaming Jimmy, was manufactured from 1938 until 1995. 57 years of the same basic engine. Let that sink in. The 671 was a two-stroke diesel, firing every revolution rather than every other revolution like a four-stroke. This gave it a distinctive, almost musical sound that truckers could identify from a mile away. With an inline 6-cylinder configuration displacing 726 cubic inches, it produced between 160 and 300 horsepower. During World War II, the 671 powered landing craft on D-Day, tanks, and military generators. After the war, it transitioned into trucking, buses, marine vessels, and industrial equipment. The Russians were so impressed, they copied the design from Lend-Lease engines. What made the two-stroke design so durable was maintaining high power at lower internal pressures than competing four-strokes. Less stress on components meant longer engine life. The Screaming Jimmy is one of the most widespread diesel engines in history, and examples are still running today, nearly 90 years after the design was conceived. Number 8. The International DT466. In medium-duty trucks, no engine commands more respect than the International DT466. Development began in 1967, and when the DT466 debuted in the early 70s, it was the largest inline 6 in International's 400 series family. This 7.6-liter diesel was designed to replace the venerable DT407, an engine famous for delivering 10,000 operating hours before needing an overhaul. The 466 didn't just meet that standard, it destroyed it. Durability came from the deep-skirt gray iron block, forged steel crankshaft with 7 main bearings, forged connecting rods, and wet-sleeve cylinder liners that made rebuilds affordable. Each cylinder was essentially a standalone unit, meaning worn liners could be replaced individually without machining the block. The DT466 powered school buses, delivery trucks, fire engines, and medium-duty haulers for over 45 years. Mechanics called it the best medium-duty diesel ever built. Fleet operators loved it because these engines ran hundreds of thousands of miles on basic maintenance. Even the mechanical versions were legendary cold starters, firing in sub-zero weather without block heaters. The DT466 is proof that simple engineering beats complicated technology. Number 7. The Cummins 4BT. If the DT466 is the king of medium-duty engines, the Cummins 4BT is the king of compact diesel power. This 3.9-liter inline four-cylinder was introduced in 1983 and quickly became one of the most versatile diesel engines ever produced. Originally designed for commercial and industrial applications, its compact size and legendary reliability made it a favorite for everything from bread trucks and forklifts to boat engines and Jeep swaps. The 4BT's claim to fame is absolute simplicity. It's fully mechanical with no electronic controls, no ECM, no sensors, no computerized fuel injection, just an inline mechanical fuel pump, a turbocharger, and pure cast iron construction. If something goes wrong, and very little usually does, a competent mechanic can fix it with basic tools. In developing countries, the 4BT remains the engine of choice for commercial vehicles because parts are everywhere and it can be rebuilt indefinitely. There are documented cases running over 500,000 miles without major work. It produces between 105 and 170 horsepower depending on configuration, which doesn't sound like much, but the torque and fuel efficiency make it perfect for commercial duty, small, tough, and practically immortal. Number 6. The Ford 300 Inline 6. If there's a single engine that defines built to last forever, it might be the Ford 300 cubic inch Inline 6. Introduced in 1965 and produced until 1996, this 4.9-liter straight six was the backbone of Ford's truck lineup for over 3 decades. It powered F-100s, F-150s, F-600s, UPS trucks, airport tugs, generators, and farm equipment. With a cast-iron block and head, forged crankshaft, 7 main bearings, and timing gears instead of a chain, the 300 was built like a battleship engine. That timing gear setup was genius. While chains stretch and break, gears maintain precision almost indefinitely, eliminating one of the most common failure points in pushrod engines. The 300 produced between 100 and 150 horsepower, with peak torque arriving at just 2,000 RPM, perfect for towing and hauling. When Ford added fuel injection in 1987, it got even better. Properly maintained examples regularly surpassed 300,000 miles without being opened, and neglected ones often crossed 100,000 without complaint. The Ford 300 built America's infrastructure, one load at a time. Number 5. The Detroit Diesel Series 60 12.7-liter. When the Detroit Diesel Series 60 debuted in 1987, it didn't just change the heavy-duty trucking industry, it reinvented it. This was the first heavy-duty diesel engine in the world to feature fully integrated electronic controls as standard. In the late 80s, truckers were used to purely mechanical engines requiring constant adjustment. The Series 60 changed everything. The 12.7-liter inline 6 became the most popular version, combining fuel efficiency that embarrassed the competition with horsepower, matching much larger engines. Detroit Diesel's DDEC electronic control system allowed real-time diagnostics, cruise control optimization, and fleet management capabilities decades ahead of their time. By 1992, the Series 60 was the most widely used heavy-duty truck engine in North America. Detroit Diesel went from less than 5% market share to over 33% in just a few years. That's unheard of. With proper maintenance, the 12.7 regularly exceeded 1 million miles, and Detroit initially prescribed overhaul intervals of 500,000 miles before raising that to 750,000. Over 1.2 million Series 60 engines have been sold. It didn't just last forever. It defined an entire generation of trucking. Number 4. The Cummins 855 Big Cam. In the 70s and 80s, if you drove an 18-wheeler across America, chances are you had a Cummins 855 Big Cam under the hood. This 14-liter inline 6 didn't just dominate the Class 8 truck market. It owned it. By 1983, Cummins captured an astonishing 63% of the big rig market, up from 29% just 8 years earlier. The engine got its name from its oversized 2.5-inch diameter camshaft, significantly larger than competitors' 2-inch cams. This bigger cam shortened the injection period, resulting in more efficient combustion and better fuel economy during the energy crisis. The big cam produced massive low RPM torque while sipping fuel, and paired with low RPM drivetrains, it became the most economical Class 8 engine available. Built with simple mechanical unit injection, cast iron construction, forged steel internals, and large bearings, the 855 earned a 700,000-mile overhaul expectation. But well-maintained engines sailed far beyond that. The basic architecture was so good that Cummins carried it directly into its successor, the legendary N14. That's how you know you got the design right the first time. Number 3. The Cummins N14. If the 855 Big Cam was the king of the 80s, the Cummins N14 was the undisputed champion of the 90s. Introduced in 1987 and formally launched in 1990, the N14 was essentially the Big Cam's smarter, stronger, younger sibling. It shared the same bore, stroke, displacement, wet sleeves, and even the same oil pan, but incorporated electronics and emissions improvements for a new era. 3 distinct versions emerged during its 15-year production run. The early mechanical models used a pressure-time injection system. The Select version in 1990 introduced electronic fuel control. And in 1996, the Select Plus arrived with power ratings up to 525 horsepower and 1,850 foot-pounds of torque at just 1,200 RPM. But here's what cemented the legend. The question was never whether the engine would reach 1 million miles. The question was how far beyond 1 million it would go. Veteran truckers will tell you the N14 was the best engine they ever ran. It consumed 20 to 30% less oil than the 855, offered better fuel economy, and Cummins supported it with parts long after production ended in 2002. For old-school reliability, mixed with just enough modern technology, nothing touched it. Number 2. The Caterpillar 3406E. When truckers talk about the greatest heavy-duty diesel ever built, the Caterpillar 3406E inevitably enters the conversation. This 14.6-liter inline 6 was the culmination of a 35-year evolution, beginning with the original 3406A in 1973. The engine went through 4 major iterations, A, B, C, and the legendary E model, introduced in 1993. The E was Caterpillar's first fully electronically controlled, heavy-duty diesel, marrying old-school mechanical toughness with precise digital fuel management. It produced between 375 and 465 horsepower in factory trim, with torque reaching 1,850 foot-pounds. The real magic was in the electronic control module, which could be recalibrated and reprogrammed. Aftermarket tunes pushing 550 and 600 horsepower became commonplace, spawning a cult following among owner-operators. The engine earned the nickname the last of the best because it represented the final era before complex emission systems changed diesel design forever. With proper maintenance, the 3406E could surpass 1 million miles. Nearly 575,000 units were produced worldwide, and thousands are still hauling freight today. Caterpillar literally built its heavy-duty reputation on this engine. Number 1, the Cummins 5.9-liter 12-valve, and here we are. Number 1, the engine that spawned the most passionate fan base in automotive history. In the mid-1980s, Dodge was losing the truck war to Ford and Chevy. Their answer was radical. Partner with Cummins, a company that built engines for 18-wheelers, and stuff one into a pickup. When the 5.9-liter debuted in the 1989 Dodge Ram, everything changed. 400 foot-pounds of torque, more than anything Ford or Chevy offered. The engine was a masterpiece of simplicity. A Bosch VE rotary injection pump, 12 valves, no computers, no sensors. The cast iron block used the same architecture as Cummins industrial engines, meaning it was built to handle vastly more stress than a pickup would ever produce. The result? Engines that routinely passed 500,000 miles without a rebuild. Many crossed the million-mile mark. The 12-valve became so beloved that pristine examples now sell for more than they cost brand new. People pay premium prices for a 30-year-old truck because of what's under the hood. That tells you everything. The Cummins 5.9 12-valve didn't just last forever. It became immortal. And that wraps up our countdown of 20 vintage truck engines that were truly built to last forever. From screaming two-stroke Detroits to bulletproof Cummins diesels, these engines represent a golden age of engineering where durability wasn't just a marketing buzzword, it was a design philosophy. Which of these engines have you owned or worked on? And which one do you think we missed? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this trip through trucking history, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.